Hello, my name is Georgie Newbury and I am a flower farmer and florist here in sunny Somerset, between Bruton and Wincanton. We grow about 250,000 stems a year for sale every year, and we make beautiful bouquets which we send all over the country with them. Normally we do lots of weddings and events, obviously not this year, but we teach masses of workshops as well. Some here on the farm, tiny now, little tiny workshops with only 5 students and me, and we teach them outside under our lovely sail, but increasingly online as well. So if you like what you see today, do come to one of our online workshops. My plan is to keep us all busy with lovely floral activities over the winter to ward off feeling miserable and depressed as we head into more being kept on our own. Anyway, the challenge I have for you is to walk around your garden and cut 30 stems. And I know that we're mid-October and a lot of people, we certainly have had 3 frosts, and you may have had a couple of frosts or some really nasty wet weather, and the garden may be looking really tired. You've maybe have been starting to clear it quite seriously. We have been too. And our dahlias have taken an absolute hammering. However, my 30 stem challenge, and there's a hashtag 30 stem challenge, so have a look and you might be inspired by things that other people have done over the time. But my 30 stem challenge is that you walk around your garden with a pair of scissors, any old scissors, not necessarily florist scissors, and a bucket of water, and you cut 10 stems of greenery or foliage, and they don't have to be, look, I've got seed heads here. So all sorts of the kind of interesting wrapping, if you like, for the bouquet. And then 10 stems of fun fillery bits. So I've got all sorts of things. I've got the last of my sages, which are really fading and going over, but I love them. And the stems smell of blackcurrants. They're delicious. But also this other sage, this is good old Amistad, which I've just got in a pot by the back door. And I imagine I'm not the only person to have Amistad in a pot by the back door. So a couple of stems of Amistad. And these are what I'm calling filler. So they could be grasses, they could be seed heads, they could be all sorts of bits and pieces that you might think would make an interesting part of your bouquet. Because what makes a bouquet good is not just big flower, bit of filler, the end, but it's different colours and different textures, and you know, you might find a twig that's got an interesting bit of lichen or some crab apples on a twig or something something interesting and different to be a bit of filler. And then I've cut the last, really, the dahlias are going, I'm afraid I'm lifting them any minute now, but if you look at them too closely, so I wouldn't sell these to anybody, but for me to go in my garden, to go in my kitchen, or actually for my mother-in-law who lives behind the camera, they'll make a really lovely bouquet. And so I've cut a few of those. And as you can see, they're not too matchy because I have a passion. I hate the word passion, it's so overused, but I have a real thing for flowers being interesting rather than pretty. So the mixture that I've cut is perhaps to anybody else's eye a bit random, but I like the clashing colours. I think it makes it more interesting and more fun to look at. So how do I make my bouquet? So imagine you've walked around the garden, you've taken a bucket with you, you've cut 30 stems of this, that and the other thing, and I hope that when you've made a little posy, you're inspired to do this. I would say everybody should, I would prescribe this from the doctor, that everybody should do this once a week through the year, whatever happens, because you develop a much more intense relationship with the closeness of your garden. It's so easy, especially in the winter, it's so easy to stand on your back doorstep with your cup of tea and it's not looking very enticing out there, and all you can see is sort of mass of green and grey and brown, and you think, oh God, it's just horrible out there, I'm not going to go. If you take your scissors and you go and you look more closely, you'll find all sorts of things to keep you amused through the winter. And you'll see how your plants develop much more closely. I promise you. I give you my word. Anyway, so once you've cut your 30 odd stems. I will admit I have cut rather more than 30 stems because I always get over excited and always cut too much. But when you cut your bits and pieces, bring them back somewhere. Always cut them into water so that they don't wilt. I always take the water to the plant and cut straight into water. And if I were going to do flowers for a party or something more important occasion, I would let them have a nice drink somewhere cool, airy and out of direct sunlight, far away from the fruit bowl. The fruit bowl gives off lots of gas that makes the flowers go over more quickly. So I might give them the morning to have a nice drink before I arrange them. And then I'm going to make a posy. So I'm going to start with some greenery, because in the same way as planting a border, you would plant the shrubs and the trees parts of the border first and then fill up the gaps with your flowers. It's very similar, as it's like making miniature gardens. Garden design in a bouquet. So I'm going to start with this lovely cineraria, which the Americans call Dusty Miller. And I'm going to keep my stems clean all the time so that anything that goes in the water there's no rubbish that's going to rot in the water. So the flowers will last longer. Plus it looks tidier. So you get exciting up here and tidy down here. And any untidiness down here doesn't distract from the exciting up here. So this cineraria, I grow it in a pot outside my back door. And it is a bit Bond Street Chanel, but I like it because I like the softness, the velvetiness of the leaf. And with foliage, there's so many different kinds of colours and shapes. You don't just have green, you can have all sorts of colours. Here's a green one, but it's mint. You might have some mint in your garden. Cuts beautifully, and for bouquets at this time of year that don't have an enormous amount of scent, a bit of mint goes a long way. And another darker colour, I love this. This is Physocarpus. The Americans call it ninebark. And I think a bit of dark foliage in your garden is really useful, particularly if you're cutting. So if I had a copper beech, I might cut a bit of it. And I have got some elder, which I'm going to use to collar the bouquet. Obviously, elder is a very magical plant, and so you must never cut elder without asking its permission. So I do feel particularly foolish as I stand there and I ask the elder whether it would mind if I cut a bit, and it never says anything, although once I got stung and I stopped. So I've made a little mix, and what I'm doing is I'm adding each stem at a time into the join between my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm holding it in a loose clamp. And then each time I add a stem, I make sure the stem is clean, and I add it at a gentle 45-degree angle, and then I twist everything in a quarter turn. And you may think this looks really, really odd. Look, gentle 45-degree angle, quarter turn. And it does look a bit odd from the beginning, but what I'm beginning to make is that nice florist twist, which will mean that the heads have got space to lean out, but also I'll get a nice strong understory, if you like, so I can stand the bouquet up. And you too can do that, so your flowers will be like, it'll look as though you've been to a very smarty pants florist. So, gentle 45-degree angle, and it goes, quarter turn. And you can see immediately how the nest of the foliage makes somewhere for the flower to sit. It sort of frames the flower. And now I'm going to work a little bit faster. The last of my cosmos, you know that if you cut cosmos in quite tight bud, it will come out slowly. It's like a surprise in a bouquet. So I never cut my cosmos when it's in flower because it won't last. I'll cut quite tight buds and let them come out. I love these seed heads of my cineraria. So these are they were quite bright yellow flowers. They're quite a sharp yellow, so I tend not to cut them. But I like the seed heads, and they're a good foil from the rather sort of Christian Dior grey. This is the reality. I like a bit of gritty reality in my bouquets. And look, none of my dahlias match each other at all. They are all just completely different. And as I go, I'm going to strip my stems and keep everything clean. Gentle 45-degree angle, quarter turn. I've got some lovely millet. If you've got grasses in your garden, They make a really nice spike and stop a posy looking as if it's one of those, you know, those very formal bicycle helmet bouquets that look as though you could knock somebody out with them. I'm rather anti that look. So, and millet is all growing in the same place in the garden. So I'm going to put it together in the bouquet, because then otherwise you get odd spikes sticking out and it looks a bit weird. This is another great silver foliage, Brachyglottis. It's a bit supermarket car park, but it makes a lovely hedge. So often people have it as a hedge. And again, it's another really lovely, soft, silvery foliage, which goes really well in a bouquet. Flowers don't have to be big. Here's Chocolate Cosmos. And I've been cutting these since July, and they smell chocolatey. And I like the way it'll stand proud of the bouquet a bit, and again, give it a bit more life. I've been cutting this Rebecca. Give me a Rebecca over a sunflower every day of the week. And I've been cutting these since July as well. They're a really giving plant, and sunflowers tend to be much heavier heads, so they're more difficult to use in a posy or a bouquet. Plus, often they grow against the neck of the stem. So they're difficult to make. It's difficult to make them smile out of a bouquet. They sort of are flat into it. So my 3 Rebecca, and I love that chocolate middle. I think it's a lovely autumnal look. So I'm beginning to have a bit of a posy, and I'm not looking really terribly carefully at what I'm putting into my bouquet as I'm putting into it, because I know what I cut. And when you really get into this, you start planting bouquets in your garden, and you never need really worry about what you're adding to your posies, because you decided what was going to go into them when you planted them. This is this gorgeous glaucous green foliage is Cerinthe, and it's also known as honeywort. And it has these little bell purple flowers at the end that the bees really love. And the bees are stuck a bit at this time of year for something to eat. So if you have a bit in your garden, you'll find it humming with bees. But you can also cut a few for your flower arrangements. What you'll see also, another thing I'm doing is I'm facing the foliage into the bouquet, because most bouquets are looked at from above. If I face the foliage out, which a lot of people you might think would be normal, then you just see the back of the leaves, and it's less attractive. You lose, particularly in the case of this Physocarpus, you lose that lovely red. So I'm going to make all my foliage face in, and I'm nearly there. You can see it's not a huge bouquet, but it's full of interest. I'm going to add a few more of my dahlias. And I don't want to do too much more than 30 stems, because I want you to see what you can get out of a 30 stem cut. Just a couple more of my lovely, lovely old cosmos. These have been flowering since July as well. And I've got a really nice mix there. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to collar it, because you know when you buy a posy or a bouquet, it's wrapped in paper and it sort of looks after it, but we're not going to wrap it in paper because we don't want to use any more paper, or we're trying to be green, aren't we? So what I'm going to collar it with is, I've got 4 dahlias. I'm going to have 1 more dahlia, and I'm going to go for real colour. Look at that. And I'm going to add it so that it's not getting mixed up with the Rebecca. And for collaring, I have got some of this lovely black elder, which I asked the tree if it would mind. And you can see how it faces in, and I can hold the material with the way that the elder sits. I can hold it, stop it falling out. So I've got 3 of those, and again, I'm keeping my stems very clean. And then a bit more scent, and I bet you have this as well. If you have a scented pelargonium, outside your back door in a pot, like everybody has. They cut beautifully. I've taken cuttings with all the material that came off the stem, so they're in a pot in the greenhouse already. And again, I can face them in, and they collar the bouquet really beautifully. And that way the bouquet feels held together. Now I'm nearly done, and I have definitely got more than 30 stems. Shall I count them? Just see. I count everything all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I've got 33 stems. So you get a good sized bouquet for 30 stems. But what I would like to do is make it look a little bit wilder. So I have got myself some honeysuckle, and I can just add the honeysuckle, and the tendrils give me extra wildness. So I love that little bit of wildness. And that, I think, will do it. It's a really lovely bouquet with 30 stems from a very autumnal garden. I'm then going to tie up my posy, and I'm going to use raffia. You can use string or ribbon or whatever you like. Raffia, the reason I like raffia is it doesn't stretch and it doesn't bruise. So it's not going to loosen up and let the stems fall out. And all I do is run the raffia twice around the posy, and I'm going to tie it up like this with a nice double knot. I never put the bouquet down because I don't want to bruise the flowers, especially if I've only just cut them and they're a bit wet or dewy. So that's all tied up nicely. And I'm going to just cut the stem straight across the bottom. And it should stand up for you. Luckily it's not windy. And there you have a really lovely, loose, pretty bouquet. Even the lady who's filming this is smiling. She's like, oh, look at that. That's amazing. And that's been cut out of, I will admit, slightly more than 30 stems. But you can see how you could do it with 30 stems. And I think the hashtag 30 stem challenge gives you a sensible amount that most people can get out of their garden. And I'm afraid once you start doing this, you will become a little bit keen, and you will do it often, which I can't recommend highly enough. I mean, you really will begin to really love your garden, even in the winter when you used to think it was very boring. And so you then become slightly obsessed about buying ribbon, because obviously if you're going to go and give these to your mother-in-law, as I am, who lives about 30 yards that way, it's nice to wrap them in a little ribbon. So all the haberdashers of the world are pleased too, because your ribbon passion becomes quite strong. And there we have a cheery, I've no idea what it looks like from your side, 30 stems challenge. It's not going to stand up again, but very easy to make, not too matchy. Go around your garden, take a pair of scissors and a bucket with some water in, and see what you can find, because I promise you there is more out there than you think. And why don't you put pictures across whatever social media you use and use the hashtag 30 stem challenge, number 30 stem challenge, and perhaps tag Wells Food Festival, and then we'll see what people are inspired to do after seeing this bit of film. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to know more, have a look at our website, commonfarmflowers.com, or come and see us do one of our workshops here next summer. We start again in the spring, or we'll see you online over the winter. Thank you very much. Bye.